good morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket is: has the two main political parties of Nigeria today, the PDP and the APC, contributed to the rise of the Labour Party's presidential candidate, Peter Obi, because of the corrupt and incompetence governance by these two main political parties in the past in Nigeria? Well. It has now become the norm for various African presidential candidates to visit the diaspora to help raise money as well as support from their various citizens for them to run for presidential or political office in their various African countries. And when they come here with heavenly and earth promises of socioeconomic development and anti-corruption policies that they intend to implement when elected into office in their various African countries. And sometimes, when fortunately for them they get elected, these promises tend to fade away, and in some cases even they become worse than the promises that they gave us before they went back to their various African countries. But I'm not going to hold that on Peter Obi, because he's just here to present his vision to the people of Nigeria in the diaspora. The Nigerian diaspora of America invited Peter Obi as the guest speaker to present his vision in 5 cities in America: Dallas, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Charlotte, North Carolina, Washington, D.C., and New York City. I didn't have the opportunity because of my scheduling conflict to go and see him when he was in Washington, D.C., I think September the 1st or the 3rd. But I've had the opportunity to listen to his interviews, one with CNN of America and others with the various Nigerian media outlets. In his interviews, he outlined his policies and vision for the future Nigeria that he intends to represent. In one of the key areas, he talked about the security problems in Nigeria and also talked about the Nigerian economic situation right now. And with the security problems, he made it clear that he's ready to take it on because of the situation, to enable Nigeria's economy to attract foreign investors, which is very key, because every foreign investor coming to any country to invest will first have to be secured by the government in terms of their investments. No foreign business is going to come to any country if the security situation in that country is volatile. It's very, very difficult. It makes it very difficult to attract foreign investors in that situation. And we have that situation in Nigeria with regards to Boko Haram, even though it's minimal, a little bit minimal, and other tribal issues and all that stuff. He talked on those and also mentioned his position on those various groups and all of that stuff. He also talked about the Nigerian economy, and he really related it to something that I've always been talking about, which is the export sector of the Nigerian economy. He talked about revamping the export sector, and he relayed the message of the revenue that currently is being generated by the Nigerian export sector is abysmal, which I do agree with him, because if you're looking at the size of Nigeria today, Nigeria's economy today, and if you look at the last year's revenue generation of the export sector, which I think was about $69 billion, that is very, very abysmal. That is very, very abysmal. Because I'm saying that because if you look at Nigeria as a country, and you even compare it to a country like Vietnam, Vietnam was, in about 20 years ago, way behind Nigeria in economic development. Today, Vietnam's foreign export revenue is about $300 billion. $300 billion. Why is it that? Because Vietnam has decided to open up his economic market. It's now into a market economy system. Because prior to about 20 years ago, Vietnam was more like a communist socialist country, just in line like China. But both of these countries decided the only way forward for economic development is a pure capitalist market system. So they decided to open their markets for foreign investors from America, Europe, and other parts of Asia to set up factories and shops in Vietnam. Today, Vietnam is the second only country in the East in Asia behind China in terms of growth, growing around 6.something%, and exporting goods totaling the revenue of about $300 billion a year. $300 billion a year. What did Vietnam do that Nigeria cannot do? And this is where I agree with what Peter Obi said, because he is laying out a vision where Nigeria has to create a system where the economic development of Nigeria will be centered on the private sector, because the only way forward for economic development in any African country or any country in this world today is going to be based on private foreign investments. And this is where I really agree with Peter Obi on, because that is where he's focusing on. Focusing on that, especially when you look at the energy sector of Nigeria. A country of Nigeria's size with its crude oil deposits, its natural resources and the crude oil deposits, a country of Nigeria should never be going through power outages and energy supplies and all that stuff in this modern age. Nigeria should never be going through this because of the corrupt system that has been in place for decades since independence, ever since Nigeria discovered crude, because of those corrupt systems that have been put in place by politicians in order to take advantage of the resources of their country for themselves and their cronies and family members. They decided not to open up the market system of Nigeria's energy sector to encourage private foreign investors to bring in more services and industrial output to help generate good revenue for Nigeria in terms of export and also build the local economy. But recently, for the past, let's say a decade now, they are moving in the right direction in that area, because the Dangote refinery is a clear example of where Nigeria should have been 25, 50 years ago. Dangote's refinery today, that is being built and almost completed, should have been done about 50 years ago in Nigeria. But fortunately, it's now happening. And based on even that estimates alone, that is going to cut down the importation of petrochemical products, and as well also help Nigeria export a lot of petrochemical products outside of the crude that will be exported and the refinery that is going to take place in Lagos on that refinery. So that's going to help reduce the foreign exchange earning that is going to be sent out to buy these products from other countries by helping bring stabilizing the Nigerian currency. So that's a very good step by the Dangote Group. But Peter Obi also talked about changing some structural systems in Nigeria. If we all know about the political systems in most of our African countries, we know that Africa's economic problems, socio-economic political problems that we are going through today in Africa is because of one thing, that is corruption. Corruption is the key driver of Africa's economic problems today. And this corruption is ingrained in the system of the politicians and their cronies and businesses in most African countries. And Nigeria is one of them. Nigeria is the biggest African country, and Nigeria is the biggest African economy. And corruption is ingrained in the system. And because of that, for him to be able to enact changes, meaningful changes, then you have to basically tear down some of these structural corrupt systems that have existed in Nigeria for the past 50, 60, or 70 years. Because he cannot enact any meaningful changes if he's not willing to go down the drain and fight to tear down some of these structural problems. But that is what he promised in his interview, to bring changes. So I'm not going to say anything about that. Hopefully, if he becomes the president of Nigeria, then we're going to hold him accountable for some of the promises that he talked about on his visit to the United States of America. Now, because of Peter Obi's rise in the political sphere of Nigeria, there's been some ramblings on Nigerian media and social media about if Peter Obi can really become president of Nigeria. And these ramblings that I've heard on the news media from Nigeria, from some politicians and some people, it's not about the qualification of Peter Obi. It's not about his qualifications, but rather about his ethnicity and his region where he's coming from in Nigeria, which is the southeast part of Nigeria. So he happens to be an Igbo. So now there are people questioning if the Nigerian citizens will elect an Igbo at this time in Nigeria to be president of Nigeria. It is very unfortunate. It is very unfortunate that in this day of age, that we still have this tribal, ethnic, religious divisions in our countries, talking about not the qualifications, not the competence, not the character, not the integrity of a presidential candidate, but rather his or her ethnicity as well as tribal or religion. I mean, this election that is going to happen next year in Nigeria, my fellow Nigerians, don't feed into this divide and conquer stuff by your corrupt politicians to tear other politicians down. I welcome the PDP presidential candidate as well as the APC presidential candidate and all the other political parties in Nigeria, presidential candidates, to make this election about ideas. If you want to challenge Peter Obi and get Peter Obi out of the race and win against Peter Obi, talk to the Nigerian people about your ideas. It shouldn't be about where Peter Obi is from. It shouldn't be about his ethnicity, but talk about his record when he was the governor of Anambra State. Talk about his proposals, what you can do better. That is what this election coming up should be about. It shouldn't be about where he's coming from and his religion and his ethnicity and all that stuff. Because this is what has torn African down. This is what has led to the economic development of most African countries because of tribalism, ethnicitism, religionism, and all the zimzimzims in Africa. So when I heard those politicians and people on TV mentioning his ethnicity and talking about that, I was very disappointed because, I was thinking that at this age, we would have moved beyond tribalism and all that stuff. But it's still there. But see, at the end of the day, it is up to the people of Nigeria. It is up to the people of Nigeria to make that decision. And I hope my fellow Nigerians are not going to make boneheaded decisions based on those issues, those divide and conquer issues. Base your decisions on the record of this man when he was a governor of Anambra State. Base your record on every presidential candidate on their record. Okay? base your determination of who you think this man is going to represent and how he's going to represent Nigeria on their record and what they aspire to do, their vision for Nigeria. It shouldn't be based on their ethnicity and all those divide and conquer stuff. And the youth of Nigeria today, because if you look at his popularity, he's gaining popularity among the youth of Nigeria because of the problems most of these youth are going through in Nigeria. It's not about because he's from he's an Igbo or from the southeast. It's because of their problems. So don't you the youth let these corrupt politicians use those divide and conquer tactics to distract what the main issue of these elections coming up is about. Because if you look at the Nigerian economic system right now, even though there's a lot of work that needs to be done structurally, knocking down the corrupt systems and the bureaucracies that have held back Nigeria's economic development, knocking down all some of these monopolistic systems, and some of this socialist mentality that exists within some of these governments, and also giving back power to most of the states, to the states in Nigeria. Because of the federal system, in my own opinion, I think the states should have more power in terms of education, as well as some of the taxes that they collect from their various states, for them to be able to implement their own educational systems. Because if you look at recently, about some months ago, the strike that enables most of the schools in Nigeria to shut down, if these schools were controlled by the states, it would have been a different story, because every state would have had their own laws and regulations towards the education system. But that is for another day. So basically, what I'm saying is this: my fellow Nigerians, don't let the corrupt politicians of your countries use this divide and conquer methods to distract you guys from the real problems facing Nigeria. The real problem facing Nigeria is a structural problem. And if Peter Obi, like he's saying, is ready to change this structural problem, I mean, it's going to be a heck of a problem for him to change it. But he has to take a strong leader. He has to take a strong leader who is willing to go down the drain, to fight the entrenched politicians and political party members who have been embedded in this corrupt system for generations. Because it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy for him to go down this drain to fight these people. It's going to be tough, because these people are entrenched in all the bureaucracies of Nigeria. But if that is the fight he is willing to take, then it's a good fight for him to take. Because if you look at the trajectory of Nigeria today, if you look at the Nigeria's music industry, you look at Nigeria's movie industry, these are industries basically it's being driven by the youth of Nigeria. And if you look at that and where it is moving around the world, it's in the right trajectory for Nigeria's economy. So now what Nigeria needs is the governance, better governance. So they need a leader who is willing to go down there and fight to take out these corrupt systems and bureaucracies that have hindered growth in the Nigerian economy for over 50 years now. And if you are able to get a leader who is willing to do that, to move that sector of the economy with the movie and the music industry, Nigeria is on the right path. And that is all Nigeria needs now, is good governance by a strong leader who is willing to tear down the corrupt bureaucratic structures that have existed in Nigeria. But so far, based on his interviews, the one that I heard from in CNN and other Nigerian media outlets, he claims he's willing to go down that road. And if he's willing to go down that road, then it's a good thing for the people of Nigeria. But the most important thing for the people of Nigeria is that no democracy has been liberated. Okay? No country has been liberated by another country. So if you are going to liberate your country from tyranny, and the corruption that has been in your systems for over 60, 70 years now, it is up to you, the youth and the people of Nigeria, to rise up, to wake up and fight that with a strong leader. I'm not here to endorse who to vote for and who not to vote for. I'm just for any African leader who is willing to take down the structures, the corrupt structures that have held Africa back over 100 years of economic development. So if any African leader in any African country is willing to take that fight, I'm all for it. So the presidential candidates for PDP, APC, and all the other presidential candidates, if they are willing to make that fight, then they should present their vision to the people of Nigeria and let the people of Nigeria make that decision when the election times comes. But don't use this divide and conquer tactics just because you're seeing the trend of the youth supporting your opponent. Win this election by your ideas, because elections are always about ideas. Elections are always about the future. Project those ideas to the people of Nigeria and let the people of Nigeria make that decision. And I hope the people of Nigeria will also put away their tribal and ethnicity and religious differences and all that stuff and look at what is important for the people of Nigeria. Every country has its own problems. America has its racial problems. You know, we have our own racial problems in America here. But at the end of the day, when people are going to vote, they don't vote because this person is that or that person is that. If that was the case, Barack Hussein Obama would never be president of America. But we vote because of the ideas, what that presidential candidate is presenting, the vision that presidential candidate has for the country.